to their house. I was coming from the party to the house to get something. So take her with you. And I'm like, oh, she's having fun with her little cousins. They don't see each other that much. So I didn't answer. So by the time I came out of uncle and auntie's house, she was under a car.
Terrible shot, Alina.
She was about 2.5 years old, about 3, maybe. Mother, God was healing hearts and restored, I think, possibly a marriage that was, nobody knew what was going to happen. And as people watched in amazement, I watched in amazement, because all I did was I just obeyed.
Even those of us who are part of all this might have forgotten how real God was for us then. And this might actually be encouragement to all of us again. And for those who are just hearing our story, this is God. He does not change. But I think that was probably one of the first times in my Christian walk where God spoke to me expressly. I mean, it wasn't even just that he spoke to me. There was no mistaking it. It was like electric currents were passing from the crown of my head to the sole of my feet. It just kept going and going and going. While I was having that conversation in my heart with the Lord, somebody there said, Sister Funmi, go and lay hands on her. I refused. Yeah. So I knew that he said, go, lay hands on her. I didn't. All I did was I prayed. And I think again, maybe it was fear of, if I lay hands on her and if nothing happens, what will happen? I think that was probably the biggest of it all, and all the other things were just by the way.
Wow. Can you talk a little bit about just maybe experiences where you have stepped out in faith, like maybe a moment where you felt like, I don't want to do this, or like, I don't want to have faith for this thing because what if I'm wrong? Or I don't want to prophesy this to this person and give them hope because what if I'm wrong, or something like that. Just more about those kind of moments where you're maybe afraid to be bold in your faith, in having faith for something specifically because you think, I don't want to get it wrong, or what if this doesn't happen right now?
Well, the converse of that, there was another story that was totally different from the one I just shared, where I stepped out boldly in faith. My uncle had been severely ill, and they were going to bring him from our hometown, which was Ilara, to Lagos for medical treatment. And I remember insisting that I wanted to go with them. I wanted to go with them. So I went with my cousin and slept in their house that night, even though my father's house was just a stone throw from their house. I slept there, and throughout the night, I was praying, because they were also people who, they call themselves, they were Christians, nominal Christians, but they were also into some, cultural things in the village, now a city. So I prayed all through that night. There was a presence in the house, and I knew, I could feel it. It was a dark presence. But as I was praying, I was, So in the morning when we were about to set out to take him and transport him to Lagos, I said, let us pray. And that was a bold thing to say because, I don't know where I got the courage from. These are people who say, hey. So they said, okay. So I prayed, and I prayed about 3 things. I said, Lord, as we go, let angels go with us. I remember specifically. And I said, Lord, please, whoever it is that you have ordained to care for him, the doctor that is supposed to treat him, let it be that doctor that we will meet. And then there was a 3rd thing. I don't remember what it was. So we set out. And as we went that morning, I was in the car with my cousin. The ambulance was bringing him. I don't know whether the ambulance was ahead of us or behind us. And I remember my cousin, he was so tired, he veered off the road. It was very early in the morning. It was not yet daybreak. And I knew that it was the prayer about angels guiding us that brought him back and got us safely to Lagos that day. Then my cousin, his daughter, was already waiting in the hospital, which was the Lagos University Teaching Hospital. The doctor that they had spoken to who was supposed to receive him, when they got there, that doctor was nowhere to be found. But there was another doctor who was just going up and down and had finished work for the day, but for some reason did not leave the hospital. So when we got to the hospital, he was the one my cousin found and said, my dad. And the man said, I don't even understand. He said, I should have left a while back, but I just couldn't leave. Something just kept me here and I've just been going. So he was the one who now took him in the hospital, treated him and stabilized him. And by the time, and then they had to send him abroad for more treatments. And I remember standing with him and he couldn't walk. He couldn't walk. I think he had suffered a stroke. I don't remember, but he couldn't walk. And I said, Lord, when he's coming back, let him be standing on his 2 feet. I mean, I could pray and believe God, and that was exactly what happened. So he was gone, I think, for about 2 or 3 months. And one day I went to their office, and as I climbed the elevator up and the elevator door opened, guess who I saw standing on his feet? It was my uncle, standing on his feet, walking by himself. And I said, God, you answered my prayer. So those were my very early years. I think that was within my first or second year of giving my life to Jesus, of rededicating my life back. So that was, that gave me some degree of confidence after the after the first time, I refused to do what God had asked me to do.
Awesome. Auntie Fola?
So I'm going to tag along on her testimony because I have a couple of incidences, but they were in terms of ministering while preaching or teaching. But I want to piggyback on what she said. So in 1989, I was in Cuba. I don't know if it was the same time. And then my younger sister, Yinka, and Henrietta, who was the niece of another diplomat there, was, we used to pray together. We used to have fellowship every night. Every night we used to pray together. We would, if it's not in the house, we'll go on the streets. In the middle of the streets, they had chairs there, and we sat down and we prayed, we sang every night because there was no churches. We only had the Catholic church, and we used to go there on Sundays when we could. So we prayed for my uncle. He was severely sick. This same uncle, lovely uncle, and we recounted 4 different illnesses that he had. One was enough to kill anybody. He had blood pressure, he had other things. So I remember this particular day, we were in a room. It was like a small office when you enter the residence at Cuba. You turn right. It was just a sofa there and a table there. And we were there and we're praying. And we're praying for him. And we had been praying, but we might have even taken a fast for him. But this is either this day we prayed a lot, or this was the last. So we knelt down, and at a particular stage, exactly what happened to my cousin and I happened to Henrietta and I. We began to groan in the spirit, and we began to pray in exactly the same tongue. And the next thing we knew, the next time we heard from my uncle, it was fine. And this was a time I believe that it was almost time to even start planning a funeral. Everybody was like, this is it. This was in 89. And I came to America in 1999. And I believe he died 10 years. I believe we told God, I used to journal, I still journal, that give him at least 7 to 8 years or 10 years, I can't remember. And I remember I couldn't be a part of his funeral arrangements.
That was what I also asked for him. I asked, and I remember when I prayed that prayer that God should add those years. I can't remember whether it was 7
I think it must have been 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I think he died either in December 88 or early January, because I came to America in January 1999, and I know that his funeral was the week after I left, because I think you went for the funeral.
Yeah.
I met you at the airport. I met you at JFK. We just happened to, that was me coming in, and you flew in from Philadelphia to JFK, And then you were like, oh, my baby sister, you know, because I was coming to meet her, but I was not going to meet her at home because she was going for the funeral. But I had to come to school. I was already 1 week late for school, so I couldn't stay. So that was,
you know, that's it. You know, I never even heard this part of your story, because I remember when I prayed that prayer when he was leaving, and I said, Lord, add so many. My auntie looked at me and said, why didn't I ask for more? And she's not a believer like us, you know, but, you know, and for us, I mean, I was young. 10 years was a long time, you know. It's not like, you know, when you are that age, 10 years is like a long, long time. And they looked really, really, we thought that they were really, really old. They, you know, they were really old, you know, all because all that is relative. And just for the sake of people who might watch this later, the supernatural is real. The power of God is real. It's tangible. Here we were, I was in Nigeria and my sister was in Cuba. And
I never knew this.
I'm just hearing this for the first time. And we were praying about the same person, the same things. So even though we were away physically, but in the spirit, there was a unity of faith. My prayer is just that, you know, we would, and Demi, I really must thank you for this, because I believe you are onto something really, really precious. Because even those of us who are part of all this might have forgotten how real God was for us then. And this might actually be encouragement to all of us again. And for those who are just hearing our story, you know, this is God. He does not change. Distance has nothing to do with who he is and what he can do. And that is why every time we pray, especially we pray in the spirit, we don't know how many other people God is connecting us with in the spirit to agree. And that is why the praying in the spirit is so critical. Listen to what Fola just said. 2 of them were praying in exactly the same tongue. And I was praying somewhere else, and we were asking for the same thing. We were asking for the same, I don't know whether it was 7, 10 years. I remember.
I think it was 10 years.
That was what we asked for. And it's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah. God is real.
Auntie Fola, you also mentioned a few other things you said in ministry that maybe didn't pertain to that. You know, I'm going to ask.
So we have this, I mentioned about we have this annual convention, and it's really intense because I'm, you know, sometimes I wish I don't see things, but I'm so detailed. I want to cover everything. And so when it's that time, a week to that time, I don't even cook. I order food because I can't even, I'm just into it. And there was a day, I remember a long time ago, I was working on this. It was like 4 a.m. in the morning. And I said, oh, it's a good time to call daddy. So I called my dad. My dad was like, he was happy. He was like, what are you doing? Why are you, no, I think maybe it was 4 a.m. maybe it was like 2 or 3 a.m. because I could say that I woke up early. I was like, what are you doing so early? I'm like, oh, I'm working. He said, no, you need to go to bed. You're working too much. So that's how much I work around that time. So my husband is supposedly gentle, but he's a very daring person. So a lot of people don't know him like that. So it takes a lot of things. God tells him to do something, he just jumps on it. I'm like, I'll be the one to plan and plan. He'll be like, let's do it. Anyway, so we were at the venue that we have, it's Blue Mountain, and it was like, I was like in the flow, like just going through everything I'm supposed to do. And then it comes to me we got there on Thursday. I mean, we probably get there a week earlier. So the program starts on Thursday. And then on Friday night, it tells me, Fola, you're going to be ministering tomorrow. I'm like, are you serious? Like, really? You see all the physical things I have to do, all the guests, all the welcome pack, all the guest ministers, like, this cannot be. Like, he said, you are ministering. I said, well, there was no point arguing. So what I did was that, I mean, I didn't have time because I still had other things I needed to do in the morning. I remember what I was wearing that day. I was wearing a pink and a white, like a kaftan blouse and a pair of jeans. And I said, okay. So the only thing I could do, because there were so many things that I didn't plan for this. This was 2008 or 9, thereabouts. Anyway, so I just turned off my phone for like 1 hour because that was all I could afford. And I just went into one of the rooms because I had all the keys for the people coming. That's them. The people are not checked in. So I just turned off my phone and went into that room and I prayed and I said, God, I don't know. This is an annual. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I did. And then I started to minister, and I was just led to do, I can't remember what it was, to sing or to call somebody. And it became, we had not had that release like that at the convention. And some people, this lady came, she was crying. Some other, God was healing hearts and restored, I think, possibly a marriage that was, nobody knew what was going to happen. And as people watched in amazement, I watched in amazement because all I did was I just obeyed. Then the second incident that came to my mind as soon as you asked that question was a Bible study at church. And since then, I've been ministering, even though I still think like, in fact, my heart, I was like, you must be, I don't even want to use any words, that for you to do this to me, it's so unfair, because all you have to do is you have to just pray and fast, leave the room, I take care of the children, and then you minister. Then I have to do all this and minister anyway. It's a long story. So since then, I've not stopped, I've not come out of ministering at our conventions. Then at a Bible study, as much as I knew I'd prepared, and then I was there ministering and I started to sing. And as I began to sing, the scripture just came to my heart. And this is, it was like, he came to heal the brokenhearted or turn beauty into ashes or something. And I just went on that line. I didn't even open my Bible to begin to minister. And the Lord just took over. And this lady came here. She had just joined the church and she had gone through so much. And she just broke down and began, and the Lord just ministered to her throughout that evening. So that was my experience. Those were the two things that came to my mind, and I believe that's what God wanted me to share, but I thought you would have forgotten.
Oh, thank God. That's amazing. And just as a recap of what we've talked about, just in this portion of the interview. So we've talked a little bit about, sometimes there are, at least this is my interpretation, there are promptings of the Spirit, and of course there's grace for God. God gives us grace, even if we miss certain moments, but there are specific moments where the things that he wants to do, and he wants to use us as vessels to accomplish that thing. So it's good for us to learn how to hear him and walk out in faith in those moments, even if it might seem silly or like, I just don't want to do this, be yielding to him so that he can do what it is that he wants to do. So yes, thank you.
You know what, I have something just came to my mind. My uncle, my mom's younger brother, Stashade's dad, when he turned 50, we were thinking of where to do his 50th birthday, and eventually we decided that we're going to do it across the street at a neighbor's house in their compound, because their compound was very narrow. So all the activity was going on across, but people were still running into their house back and forth. So I was about 19 at this point, 18. So I crossed the road, and one of my aunt's nieces, she's from the Laleye family, her younger brother, Uncle Lalere, who is in Texas, I think it was their baby girl. So I saw her, she was having fun with all of our little cousins, and I just had an impression in my heart, take her with you. And I crossed to the other house, to their house. I was coming from the party to the house to get something. So take her with you. And I'm like, oh, she's having fun with her little cousins. They don't see each other that much. So I didn't answer. So by the time I came out of Uncle and Auntie's house, she was under a car. She was about 2.5 years old, about 3, maybe her, what can I use to describe it? Let me get it. Yeah. So this is the wheel of the tire of the car. It was the front tire. Her head was here and her hand was here. So somebody just screamed, "Stop!" So if the car rolled forward, it was going to be on her head. If it rolled backwards, it was going to be on her hand. There was no, I stood at the gate and I was like, my God. And then the car the person just stopped and we're able to get her out.
Jesus.
And
Lord.
she just had a scratch. You know, I saw her. So that's, obedience. I mean, I don't know, I would have lived with that. I saw her in Upper Derby at the Gunkorode's house a while back. And they were like, "Oh, who is this?" And they were like, I said, "What's your name?" They said, "Olale." Where they said, "Oh, a friend from Texas." Olale. And I was like, "Are you baby?" She was like, "Yes." I'm like, then I told her the story. So,
Wow.
So it's good to listen.
It is good, though. It is good to hear and it's good to listen.
Disobeyed, but God had mercy on me.
Yes, God has mercy. Thank you. So continuing in this, can you talk about a major encounter that you had with God that let you know, like, no, there is a God. There is God, oh.
There is God. Okay. Again, it was in those early years when I felt in my life and I had joined, it was again our house fellowship. God taught me so many lessons there. And anytime we prayed, God would answer. So there was this particular occasion. One of us came and said, "Look, there's a woman in my husband's place of work." And this was a multinational company. I don't want to mention the name, but it was a multinational company, and they had this their office in Nigeria. Their headquarters is in the UK. They are all over the world. And she said, "There's this woman in my husband's place of work who is just making life difficult for him." I think he had just been promoted and, company politics. Anyway, to cut a long story short, he had been promoted to a very sensitive position where there was power and there was money. So we prayed, just a simple prayer. That was on Sunday. By the time and there were no cell phones in those days. By the time we saw her on Monday evening, she said, "Do you know that woman we prayed about yesterday?" It was the company ambulance who took her out of the company that morning to hospital. She got to work and God dealt with her there. She had to be taken out. To the hospital. God executed judgment immediately. When we had that, all of us, we trembled. So there's a God who fights the battles of his children. And he's like, I told them in church yesterday, I said, God is a jealous God. We are his treasures and he guards us jealously. So, I mean, in that very first or second year of my rededication back to God, I was having all these encounters and knowing that truly God is real. Mm-hmm.
Scary. I mean, mine is not that dramatic. So, but I'm just trying to follow my heart and go with whatever popped into my heart. So what popped into my heart was when I was in Ife, my first college, and it was a time that I was so broke, like I didn't have any money at all. And how do you communicate? And my parents were in Cuba, at that time. So things were very rough. They were out. And even though your parents were there, I don't know what happened, but I don't know. Anyway, so I was like hungry. Like, in fact, there was this particular day that I had not eaten for like a whole day, and we had fellowship and I went. And while we were praying, we're in a circle. I think we're preparing for our convention. That was Agape celebration. That was the first one that we had, and I was in the planning committee then. So somebody just with their eyes closed, because I don't know how I saw them. Somebody with their eyes closed just came and just squeezed money into my hands. I think it was 10 naira, but I mean, I was able to manage it for like 3 days somehow.
10 naira then was a lot of money.
Yeah, I was able to live on it for 3 days. And then when that ran out, another person gave me 10 naira. I didn't tell anybody. Then when that ran out, another person gave me 10 naira. And then when that ran out, my big sister too was on campus for looking, but I was so busy. She had been looking for me. My stepmom had come and she had given her my pocket money. It was like 250 naira. That was a lot of money then. So she had been looking for me. I was either in fellowship or this, and she couldn't leave the money. So by the time the third one ran out, the third 10 naira ran out, God provided that, and I was able to get my pocket money. So I never forgot that experience, especially because I told God I was going to trust him, and that I was not going to beg or something. I wasn't going to do anything. And I was hungry for like a whole day. But I mean, the fact that somebody, I really don't know which one of us, because it was dark. The person just put it in my hand and went back. I still don't know who did. And then, yeah. So that really
tangible answers.
Wow, that's amazing. It's also interesting just to note that also God will use us to be that person for other people, right? Like, so for those miracles to happen, it's not most times not going to fall from heaven. It's like God will impart you or impress upon you to also be a giver to others. So that's incredible.
Can I say something? I'm sorry.
Of course.
What you just said. So there was when my husband first began to go to Liberia. So, and honestly, when they go to Liberia on those trips, the church is, I mean, like, we drain almost every account, personal account, and it's a lot. It's a lot. So this particular day, I know where I was. I was at Pathmark. Pathmark is closed by now. Actually, they are not in existence anymore. I was at Pathmark. I was on the aisle, and I just had a thought: give this person 500 naira, $500. $500. This was like 10 years ago. It's not like we have extra money like that. I mean, I could use that. I don't even think we had paid all the things that we needed to pay. But I mean, it was too random. It was too random for it not to be God. I mean, I wasn't thinking about her name and last name. So I called her. I said, when are you able to come to the office? Oh, she said she's busy or something. I said, okay, come as soon as you can. So I went to the office, and then she came, and I took cash, and I went to get money from our personal account, and I gave it to her. And she broke down and she began to cry. She said, Fola, my rent money. I didn't know where to get my rent money from. She said, and administered at the convention, and there was this book that I'd told them to read. And every convention, I tell them to read that book. And every time I minister, I almost read it every time. It's Following God's Plan for Your Life. It's by Kenneth Hagin. If you see mine, it's like in shreds. I still have it somewhere there. So he talked about forgiveness. She said somebody had done something for me that really, really hurt me, and I was finding it hard to forgive them. But when you told us to read that book and to forgive something that she did, I think she just forgave the person like 2 days ago. And that was around the time that the Lord told me. And she said, I'm able to pay my rent. I'm able to pay my rent. So that was profound. Because I called my husband. I said, this is what I believe. He said, whatever God tells you to do, just do it. Because I said, I'm just telling you, based on what we have, it was like, if God tells you to do it, just do it. So just to answer that, God will tell us to do such things to people as well sometimes.
Wow, that's amazing. And just so Auntie, now you've given 2 examples. I know, Auntie Funmi, you also have definitely some examples of God's provision, whether through your life or using you for other people. Can you speak a little bit about any examples that come to mind?
I will tell you one that just made me begin to cry. think it was about 4 years ago. For a long time, I needed to have dentures for nearly 20 years. And every time I'm like, I can't afford this. So I think it was it 3, 4 years ago, I said, now is the time. So I went, did all that needed to be done, and I didn't have money to pay. And how much was it? It was going to cost about, at the end of the day, it cost about $7,000, if I remember correctly. And so I said, okay, I'll just do it. And the dental office said, we have a credit plan. So I took the credit plan, and all along I was just into the Lord. I said, Lord, you have to pay for this thing. I don't want to, I've already said I don't want to do credits for anything. So anyway, and that's, look, this is also, you also promised that you will rebuke the devourer for me and the typer. Anyway, to cut a long story short, it wasn't a month that I had that thing done. That I was just, somebody just came and said, gave me a check for a few thousands. I'm like, I looked at it, I'm like, okay. A few days later, another check comes in the mail from, somewhere. By this time, I'm already hitting about close to $5,000. It wasn't more than a few days later. The bank sends me another check that there was money that whatever. They sent me another check. My money was already hitting $6,000. It wasn't more than a few days later that I get a check from the government. The US government will send you a check. I mean, it wasn't my tax return. I looked at, by the time I opened that official envelope and took out the check, I began to cry. I'm like, Lord. Then family sent me money. Everybody sent me money. The government sent me money. Bank sent me money. Everybody, church sent me money. I'm like, by the time the final checks were coming in, I sat down and I was just sobbing like a baby. I'm like, Lord, and every penny, I paid off that money. I'm like, God, he touched my heart. He truly touched my heart, that you remember me like this. God is awesome. And he will use anybody and anything to meet the need of his children.
Amen.
Well, the one that comes to my mind is, and I don't think it was a leap of faith, is when I started church, Living Spring, 23 years ago. I can't call it a leap of faith because I really didn't know what I was doing. So I didn't know, I had no clue that church is difficult. I just said, you know what? I want to just go and practice my Lord. Let me just give God what he wants and be done with it, and go to New York and have my practice, And so the church started 23 years ago. But then looking back, I realized that, wow, for people on the outside, they were like, how did you do it? They used to ask me, how? And I'm like, I didn't even know what they were talking about because I had absolutely no clue. No clue. I was just naive and maybe a little stupid because it's only
I said, I can't afford Christian school. I can't afford private school, and I can't afford public school either. So I homeschooled. And Erin, she was done with the curriculum in like 3 months. The first week that we went, the first 2 weeks, everything. Our cars that had no problem, they began to have problems. Stopping on the highway, stopping at Staples, buying schools. I mean, it was sometimes we'll see like the terminal of the car physically lifted up from the car. Like, how does this happen? How does the terminal of the battery lift? It was almost as if somebody was physically trampling our. It was a lot. But you know what? I wouldn't have, if I had to do it again, I would do it the same way. And that was a leap of faith. And